Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. Happy Masterclass Friday, my favorite Friday of the month, of the week. The only Friday of the week. So, for those of you who are new, my name is Terry White, Worldwide Photography Evangelist here at Adobe. And Masterclass Friday, for those of you who are new to the channel, means that this is the day that all the evangelists dedicate to an hour each of their own disciplines. So, we have graphic design by Paul Tranny, photography by myself, Photoshop by Paul Tranny, as well as Jason Levine doing audio and video, and Kyle Webster doing art and or digital painting and art and Photoshop, as well as Howard Pinsky doing UI UX design. And those are sprinkled throughout the next few hours with some daily creative challenges sprinkled in between. So after me will be a Photoshop daily creative challenge and then a masterclass after that. So you can stay tuned to b.net/Adobe Live throughout the whole day. And even if you can't stay for the whole day, yes, all of these are available to watch on replay. I love my replay numbers, so thanks for people that come back in and watch the replay. Now, for those of you who are watching on various channels and platforms, maybe you're watching on Twitter, maybe you're watching on YouTube, maybe you're watching on LinkedIn, which I'm trying to get that going today. And whatever you're watching on, you can hang out and watch there, that's fine. But just know that the chat that I'll be looking at with Charlie and Shari and Nicholas and Eve and Sam Peterson and a whole bunch of others are that Behance chat. So if you want to participate in the chat, head over to b.net/Adobe Live. If you don't care about the chat, then you can hang out and watch wherever you are. And I may see your question, but I probably won't. But I do see Kevin Stewart over there on Facebook saying good morning. And I see Sam Peterson over in the YouTube channel moderating there. And I see Anisha Techno over on my YouTube. So I can't look at all those different screens, but note that if you do want to participate in the chat, feel free to head over to b.net/Adobe Live. All right, so with that said, I'm going to kick off into today's topic, which is one of my favorites. And I realized earlier, or actually last week, that I hadn't done this topic in a while. I usually try and do it at least once a month. Or at least once every 5 or 6 weeks at the most, and I hadn't done it in a while, and that is I get users to submit their photos, whatever photos they want, preferably unedited, meaning leave me something to do, and then I would show them my process for editing their photo. So just as a recap, this is not a review, this is not a critique, this is not me critiquing your photography. I may give you a tip here or there, but that's not what the purpose is. The purpose is you have a photo, hasn't been edited yet, or maybe you have edited, but you're sending me the unedited version, and I go ahead and take a look at it and show you how I would edit it. Now, a lot of people come into this and saying, oh, where's the link to submit the photos? That time has passed. I share that link early in the week on social media. I shared it again yesterday, and it's in the info on Behance but it's too late to submit because I'm already doing the class now. I've already got all the entries queued up, ready to go. But just stay tuned to my social media if you want to participate next time and get the link, usually, like I said, no less than a week in advance to submit your photos. And then I will add them into my Lightroom special catalog for this. And hopefully we'll get to those. Now, that also means that I won't get to every single photo because in more cases, I get photos that are submitted, more photos submitted than I have time for. But I usually, every time I do this, bring some of the ones in that I got from previous episodes and get to those as well. So if I don't get to your photo this week, that doesn't mean I won't ever get to it. It just means I won't get to it this week. So I see Deb Davis. She submitted a photo or two. Matter of fact, Deb, I even have one of your older ones I'm going to do today. Caroline, Reverb Mike. So it's going to be a party today. Let's go ahead and get to it. All right, so I'm going to head over to my computer. And I've got Lightroom Classic open, and this is not my normal catalog. This is a catalog I built just for this purpose. So this is only photos that were submitted by other users. None of these are mine. And And they're in no particular order, although I did try and mix up a little bit, landscape, portrait, landscape, portrait, travel, just so we're not doing the same kind of photo 5 times in a row. And also some photos need more than others. So that's the other thing that, what decisions do you make in deciding the image is a snapshot or creative? Shari's asking a very important question. And Shari, I'm going to address your question right now because that happens a lot. So Shari asked, and it's Terry with a Y, by the way, what decisions do you make in deciding whether the image is a snapshot versus a creative one? If it's my photos, I try not to just do snapshots unless it's just for me personally. But if it's someone else's photo, basically what I consider a snapshot is a photo that anyone in the same situation would have pointed a camera at and snapped and got the same thing. In other words, if we all stand in the same spot, point our cameras at the same thing and click, and then we submit them all, they're probably all going to look pretty much the same. Those are snapshots. Those are literally you walked up, you went click. There wasn't a whole lot to it. If it's creative, that means that you put a little bit more effort into it. It could have been you did a lighting technique. It could have been you shot it at an interesting angle. It could have been you did a special kind of crop or composition on it. It could have been you added some things to it in post. Those are creative shots. But a snapshot is literally you walk up, oh, cute mountain range, click, and you keep walking. That's a snapshot. So to answer that question, and we do have some snapshots in here, so that's why I said I would address that today. All right, let's get to it. So one of the first photos is a photo. Let's get in. Let me show it to you full screen. This is, they basically saw a rainbow and said, click. Like, I'm going to try and capture this rainbow. And as you can see, that it's kind of stormy out still, or the rain was just going away. It's kind of like, the sky isn't gorgeous, but there's a rainbow out there, and that's really the subject. That's really what they were trying to capture. All right, so let's get into what I would do to this photo. Now, this is, the other caveat is you will see me do a lot in Lightroom, and this, I'm in Classic, but the same things I would do whether I'm in Classic or Lightroom, or even on my mobile devices. If it needs more, I might go to Photoshop. So I'm only going to go to Photoshop when I want to or need to, but if I can get it all done in Lightroom, I'll get it all done in Lightroom. A hazy shade of winter, Reverb Mike says. All right, so I'm not sure if it was wintertime, but it's definitely hazy. All right, so let's take that image over to the Develop module, or if you're working in Lightroom, the Edit module, or Edit, not a module. And a couple things that I note. So for example, first of all, I can see right from the description, John submitted a JPEG. And so I'm not going to be able to put a raw profile on it because it's just a JPEG. So I would skip that step. The next thing I would do is I like to let Lightroom or Camera Raw take a crack at it. Like, in other words, if I think that Lightroom or Camera Raw will make the image better just with a single click, I'll go ahead and apply that single click. If I don't agree with everything that single click does, then I'll make my adjustments, as opposed to me having to start from scratch, making all the adjustments one by one. So just doing an auto tone to this, brighten the photo up. It pretty much brightened it. It, added a little bit of vibrance to it. And that's pretty much it. Like, it didn't really do a whole lot, but it made it a little better. Now, I would then go in and say, well, since we're talking about haze, usually auto will never adjust texture, clarity, and dehaze. So it's leaving those up to you as to do a little bit more creative work on it. So I'm going to go ahead and add some dehaze to it to kind of add some of that contrast into it and bring back some of that sky. Now, the problem with dehaze is, or just about all the sliders, is that you reach a point where you can go too far. So for example, I see the blue really starting to come out, but if I go too far, that will really start to add some artifacts and grain and all kinds of bad things to the photo that I don't want. So you have to use it sparingly, meaning that while it may look like it's going to do a really dramatic, great job, if you go too far, it will make your photo look really bad. So don't go too far. What's too far? When it starts to look bad. What's not far enough? When you still want to go further, but you haven't gone to the point where it looks bad yet. So let's take it back down to where we were, 0. And we're going to go slightly up on the dehaze, and I'm being very careful to say that's about it. That's about all the dehaze I'm going to get, because if I go any further, I start to see the artifacts in this dark area of the sky. Now, I want to go further, but if I go any further on the overall image, then I'm going to get those artifacts up here in this cloud. So what I could do is I might even pull back a little and say, that's definitely back far enough to where I don't see the artifacts. And then I may attempt an adjustment brush. So I may go into with the adjustment brush, because that lets me put the adjustment wherever I want. And then I can go in and start with a preset under Effect for Dehaze. So that gives me a little bit of dehaze, turns off everything else. And then I can go in with my adjustment brush. I'm going to make my brush bigger by hitting the right bracket key. And then I can paint in the rest of that effect, but just not on that one cloud that we know will be too much. So I could paint it in down here, maybe paint it in up here a little. And again, everywhere I'm painting it, I still have the adjustment to be able to say more or less. So I still have a slider for it. Now, if I say, well, I see at the top of the rainbow, it's starting to give me those artifacts, I can hold down my Option or Alt key and erase it off that part. Say, no, that's too much. It can't handle it at the top there. It's not enough, but I can keep it anywhere else I want it. I don't want it on the bottom there. It's too much. Let's take it off there, take it off there. There we go. So you can selectively add it. Or you can say, you know what? I am going to select that point and delete it. There we go, start over. And I might say, let's just go in and make the brush smaller. I might say, well, I just want to bring out the detail in the rainbow. So I may want to just paint it in there. And that's too much, I see that. But once I get it painted in, and I'd probably want to do it with straight lines, but once I get it painted in, then I can dial it down. I can say, oh, that's too much, but let's dial it down a little bit and just apply it only on, and then let's kill some of the edges here. There we go, erase off the sharp edge there, and I can apply it just where I want. So you can selectively apply this wherever you want to get the effects that you want in the parts of the sky that wouldn't overdo it. So like I said, I can come down here, do more, come over here, do more, come over here, do more. And then I have an adjustment just for where I'm painting, not in those clouds, not where I don't want to do too much. And just to show you the difference, if I go over to, if I go back to dehaze and I adjust it, that's where I paint it. So I can really see where I paint it. And I can pull it back down to just enough for that area. So I can stack these up. I can keep adding more and more of these as needed. So I'm going to get off the adjustment brush, and then the only other thing I might do is play around with contrast. Like just add a little more contrast to the foreground there. And I'm going to attempt something here. I'm going to go ahead and grab a graduated filter, and I'll start from right here underneath this cloud and pull down. And that graduated filter is using dehaze, so I'm going to turn off dehaze and maybe just go with exposure. Nope, it's too much. Can't handle it. Like that cloud is just going to be destroyed if I do any of this. So it was a nice experiment. It was nice to try, but that's about it. Now the only other thing I might look at, which it looks pretty level, I was going to say to make sure your horizon line is straight. It looks like it's a little up to the right here, but the ground actually looks like it's straight. So I wouldn't do too much there. But the problem with this image is that because I only got the JPEG, I don't know if it was ever shot in RAW, I don't have the range of detail or range of, not exposure, not detail, the dynamic range to work with that I would maybe have if it was a RAW file. So it's a JPEG, I can only do so much. But that's I brought it out a little bit more from where it was. That's before. So again, It's easy to look at better until you see before. So that's where we started. That's where we ended up. And you could go ahead and tweak it a little bit more, but that's going to be about it for this image, because if I do too much more, it will start to introduce artifacts. All right, rule of thirds, rainbow should be off center. Why not crop? Shari, there's no reason that you cannot do any of the things you're thinking of. You can absolutely crop this image and recompose it, but I'm talking about as far as the editing that I would do thus far. Yes, that's what I do. Now, what Shar is referring to is that we tend not to try and put things dead center in our frame. So I could absolutely go in and crop and maybe make the rainbow more of the image by doing something like that. So having it come in and getting that to be more of the subject. Just hadn't got there yet, but yeah, so you can absolutely recompose. And what she's referring to as far as the rule of thirds is concerned, you notice that when I get a crop, I get this 9 rectangle grid. That is what we refer to as the rule of thirds. It breaks up your image into thirds, both horizontally and vertically, and you tend to put the most interesting parts of the photos at one of the intersections. So there's the intersection right there for that rainbow, and we get what Shar is asking for. But absolutely you can do that. Now, even though there's still a little bit of grain left in this photo, so last but not least, you might go into your detail and you might tweak the noise reduction. And you can really see it if here, let's zoom in. If I turn the noise reduction off, you can really see the grain right in here in the lower right-hand corner. And I'm just going to add a little bit of noise reduction, kind of soften that grain. Grain does not bother me, but if it's an excessive amount, especially on a daylight or a daytime or not a nighttime photo, then I probably will add a little bit of noise reduction to reduce it. All right, so that is what I would do to that photo. And again, you can always do more, you can always do less, but that's pretty much where I would go with that photo. Next up, Pixel Cover Visuals sent me quite a few self-portraits. And so this one is a raw file. So let's go into some of the raw processing that I would do to this photo. So first and foremost, since it is a raw file, I get my raw profiles over here on the right-hand side. I'm going to go ahead and choose portrait because it is a portrait. And all that does is just give me a nicer foundation to start with. So I explained this in the presets masterclass that presets versus profiles. Profiles don't move any sliders where presets do. So profile, just think of that as your foundation and then you go from there. All right, now that we got that in place, before I even worry about the shadows and highlights, I would again click my auto tone. But before I even get to that, let's see if we need to apply any lens correction. Because I do have the raw profile or raw image, hopefully the profile is in it from what lens this was shot with, and that will apply any lens corrections to the photo. And I can see it in the corners where it's starting to unbend the photo just ever so slightly. So I usually would apply a lens profile correction to the photo as well, especially if I have the raw. All right, next up, I would always hit my auto button just to show me what that would give me. And yes, it gave me my my exposure back. It gave me the exposure I was looking for. It fixed my highlight warning issue, but I still have a little shadow clipping. But it's so minor, I can't even see the warning area in the photo. It's like under his arm right here or under his hand. It's so minor, but if I wanted to adjust for that, I can drag right here on the histogram. So what I'm doing, when you're on the histogram in Lightroom Classic, each section allows you to make an adjustment. So I'm in the blacks area. I was basically dragging it to the white warning went away. Once that warning goes away, I know that shadows are no longer being clipped. All right, so exposure-wise, the photo is properly exposed. Doesn't mean I wouldn't necessarily disagree with Lightroom's auto adjustment, and maybe I might pump up the exposure just a little bit more. And I also might pump up the shadows just a little bit more, because now we're just doing things suited to taste. All right, so once I got the image properly exposed, the only other thing I would start to look for is, okay, what's bothering me or distracting me in this photo. I don't know what this thing is on the left-hand side behind him. It looks like it might be a chair or something. I don't know what that is. But it's something I noticed. I also see some dappled light on the ground. Again, it's there from the trees. I know what it's from. But those are the kinds of things that I might be distracted by. Now, I could certainly crop off that edge and get rid of that. But I don't want to crowd him into the frame any more than I have to. So in this case, I might go ahead and head over to Photoshop. So I just did a Command E or Control E on Windows. That will edit a copy of the image in Photoshop because it's a raw file. So with raw files, you automatically get a copy because you're never editing the raw file to begin with. So in this case, I might try, because I've never tried it on this image, I might try my spot healing brush just to see if I can heal that out of the photo. And it did it. It did it. It got rid of it. And then for this dappled lighting, again, I know what it's from, but it doesn't make it any less distracting just because I know where it originated from. So I might use my patch tool and just try and remove some of the brighter spots, just so the person looking at this photo is not concentrating on, because our eye tends to go to the brightest areas of the photo. And now he's got a mask here, which good for you for having a mask. And the string from the mask obviously should be there because it helps hook on the mask. But I would debate whether or not I would just remove the bottom one because it's hanging there in the way. But then again, it might look weird if you take it off because then it's like, well, how does the other part of the mask clip on? But it could be folded under. So these are the things that go through in my head when I'm making these decisions as to, should I remove that? Should I not remove that? What will be the consequence if I remove it? Will anyone miss it? And the answer, will anyone miss it, is usually no. No, because no, in other words, you're not missing something that you never knew was there. So in that case, if I remove it, you're not saying, where's the other strap? You're not looking for it. You just know he's holding a mask. You assume that he has a way to put it on. All right, so let's get one more little piece of dappled light out of this. Patch tool, just softening that light a little bit. Oh, that might not do so well. Oh, not bad. And you can even use your clone stamp and just clone that out a little bit. Too far. Probably use a hard edge brush since I'm going against the hard edge. So let's go ahead and change our brush. Hardness up to 100. That way, if you're going up to a hard edge, you won't get that soft look on the edge because you're not using a soft brush. There we go. So just taking out some of that distraction. And since we're speaking of distraction, and again, these are little nitpicky things. These are not anything wrong with the photo. This is just Terry's little nitpicks. So he's got some dappled sky above his head that makes me see it. So first I might go for the bigger parts of the sky just to kind of take that out. And then, now again, because it's touching his head, I might switch the mode from normal to content aware, which usually does better on edges. And then last but not least, using that sharp edge clone stamp tool. Just get rid of it there. Now it looks like you can see where I did it. And that's okay, because now I'm going to blend it back in using the patch tool on normal. Because I'm not going to touch the edge anymore. I can blend to my heart's content. All right. If I missed a spot, you get it. But that's pretty much it. So save, close, and come back. And it will put a copy of the photo right next to the original raw file. So a lot of people are saying, like, how come you don't make a duplicate layer when you head over to Photoshop? It's because I already have a duplicate. When I come back to Lightroom, I don't need a duplicate layer. Someone said there's a stain on the jacket. I didn't notice it. I still don't see it. But if you see it, get rid of it. I see the patch. I'm not really seeing a stain. But I trust you. If you saw a stain, then remove the stain. I'm not really seeing it, so it wasn't something that stood out for me. Now, the only other thing I might attempt while we're back here in Lightroom is I'm on the edited version now, and I might go in and use a radial filter. And I'll set that radial filter to exposure. And just to add just a little bit of, like, in other words, if we had added a little light to his face, we need to toggle that, invert it. There we go. That's too much, but just adding like a little bit of fill light to the person's face. Now that's too much. We're going to turn it down a little bit. But just like, in other words, if we had used a flash, that's what we'd get. So this is the, that is the, yep, okay. All right, so that's it. That's what I would have done. So this is where we started, and that's where we end it. So start it with all that stuff around him, and then we end it without all that stuff around him and a little bit of light on his face. All right, next up, let's go to this one. Now, this is a challenge. I'm going to say why it's a challenge. It's because your subject is surrounded by a bunch of distractions, like a ton of distractions. It's where you got this kid concentrating on the train coming around the track there. And you got two people behind him. You got someone walking off in the distance. You got some guy sitting over on the right. I don't know, it could be a relative. You got some guy in the blue sitting over to the right. You got the table on the left-hand side with this white panel and these wires coming out of it. You got the sign in the background. You've just got a ton of things that make people go look and say, what's that? Who's that? What's that over there? What's this? What's that white sign say? So forth and so on. So if I had the chance to shoot this again, I'd wait. I'd wait for all those people to be not in the background. And if you're never going to get a shot without people in the background, at least wait for the people not to be directly behind him. So that your biggest problem is not so much the subject. Your biggest problem is everything else around it. And I could go into Photoshop and spend a lot of time removing each and every one of those things. And it would take time to do it, but you have to ask yourself, is that worth it? So from the standpoint of my limited time today, what I would do is I would first and foremost go and crop this photo. So I would come in and I have my crop unlocked so I can crop any way I want. And I would certainly, now the problem, if I come in too far, I'm going to lose that train over there, but that train's really not, I mean, it's a cool looking train, don't get me wrong, but it's not really that important because this is where we want people to look. We want people to look at the kid and the train that's coming over here, this shallow depth of field. So I'm going to lose that train. I'm going to lose this stuff over here. And then I'm going to lose the tops of these people. So that way, at least, when you're looking at this photo, you're forced to look at the subject. Even though you still got a couple people in the background, you don't see their faces, you just see it's people in the background, and your eye immediately goes back to the person. Now, if I really want to go into Photoshop and take those two people out, it'd be a lot easier than it was before because I only have to remove them and maybe replace them with some of this scenery over here. So that would be, and the same thing with his arm. That's pretty much easy. That's easier to patch out than patching out all of him. And don't forget, by the way, if you do go over and take the people out, don't forget to take their legs out because that's one of those Photoshop fails that we always catch. So I just happen to notice her leg is showing down here. And if you took all of this out and made it grass, then it would be like, well, whose legs are those? So you got to look around the photo if you're going to do that kind of stuff and make sure you get rid of everything that was a part of the thing you removed. I might even crop down just a little bit more. Maybe something just like that. There we go. And then now I can concentrate on the other adjustments I would make. So let's go into, this is a JPEG, so let's go into auto. And so again, that's not quite what I don't quite like everything it did. So let's bring back up the blacks in the photo. Let's also bring up the exposure a little bit more. It was overexposed, but it brought it down a little too much. There we go. And we can see what dehaze will give us. There we go. His skin tone really got warm when I did that. So I might cool this photo off just a little bit. There we go. All right, so there we are. Now, if you were attempting, let's say you were going to attempt to do what I said, and you're going to say you're going to remove the people in this photo. This is what you would need to do. I'm going to hit Command-E to edit. Because this is a JPEG, it asks me if I want to edit a copy or an original. I do want to edit a copy with my adjustments. That will take it over to Photoshop. And first and foremost, let's get rid of this guy. So what I would want to do is I want to make sure I get rid of this guy's arm, but not the table. And so I could either attempt a patch or I could attempt a clone. Now, if you want to protect the table and the kid, then the best thing is to do is select those objects first. So let me try a select subject. I just want to see what I will get. Select subject. Yep, as I expect. Ooh, I did get a lot of the table in the train, but I also got some of the arm. But it did a good job. So I'm going to go ahead and select this, that it skipped. Ooh, it did a really good job selecting everything, but including the arm. So now all I have to do is use my, my quick selection tool, hold down the Option key or Alt key to tell it to subtract that arm. Great. Now that I got that, now basically I got everything I want to, I'm not worried about the stuff, the logs on the train and all that stuff at the bottom because I'm not touching that area. But what I really wanted to isolate was the kid and the table around the things I want to remove. The other part of the track, the stuff at the bottom, although I do need this, hang on. I do need this. Oh, undo, Shift key. So Shift key to add, Option or Alt key to subtract. I do need that part of the bottom. But now that I got this, what I will tell Photoshop to do is to select everything except this. Meaning, the kid and the table are selected now, but if I go up to my select menu and I choose inverse, meaning inverse the selection, that means select everything else but the kid and the table. So now, if I were to, for example, go to my clone stamp tool, and I choose a nice soft brush in this case because I can, and I grab some of that grass and I come over to the arm here, I can go to town and never touch that table, even if I'm overlapping the table, because the table's protected. It's not part of the selection. Same thing with these people over here. If I want to start with this grass up here, let's get a nice healthy area starting up there, and I come over here behind the kid and I start cloning them out, guess what? They're not, nothing's going to be touched. Oh, hang on. Sorry about that. I clicked by mistake. Hold on. There we go. Nothing's going to be touched on the table or the kid because they're isolated. So I see part of the track that wasn't isolated. Next time I need to check my selection. All right. But anyway, I can get all of that done right there. And I'm going to switch to my history brush, which is the letter Y, and unpaint this part right here on the track. All right. Now you got your shot. And now you have the shot. And by the way, that tree's duplicated. I don't want that. So let's just go in here, grab another spot. I don't need a duplicate tree. There we go. All right, now you got your shot. Now you have the thing that, and don't forget the legs. I almost forgot the thing I told you not to forget. There we go. All right, now you have your shot. You have just the thing that's important. You don't have all this other stuff. All right. All right, cool, cool, cool. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to close it. That will put a copy right next to the original inside of Lightroom. And there it is. And so this is where we were with the crop. And this is where we ended up. Getting rid of that stuff we don't need. So now we can focus on just our subject. All right. Next up, here's a portrait. I love portraits. And this is a raw file. It's my favorite thing to do because I'm a portrait photographer, and I got a nice, clean, great image out of camera, just the raw file, away I go. So here's what I'll do, the usual. So let's start with a lens correction. It's already applied, awesome. By the way, let me reset this. Okay, cool. The lens correction is applied, and by the way, a lot of times the lens correction will be automatically applied, especially if it was shot with a mirrorless camera. So whatever, either she applied this by herself or it was applied by the camera itself, which just saves me a step. Next up, we'll choose portrait as our starting point. Again, slight difference here. The white balance looks really good, so I don't need to fix anything there. So last but not least, I will hit auto just to see what Lightroom does. And Lightroom made that image too dark. So I don't like what it did with exposure. So I'll double click exposure to set the exposure back. Now, it was headed in the right direction. It just went too far. The image is slightly overexposed, but it went way too far. So I would come down a little, maybe about right there, but not nearly as far as Lightroom wanted to take it. Now I see some shadow clipping in her hair. So I have my highlight and my shadow clipping warning turned on. So whenever I hover over this white triangle in the histogram, it shows me where the clipping is. Blue, that blue area in her hair on her shoulder, that's where the clipping is. So once again, I just hover right below the clipping warning into this section called blacks, and I just drag to the right until that white goes away. Once this white triangle goes away, I know my shadows are no longer being clipped. All right. Tom says I beat him to the legs. Wasn't that the boy's shirt? It might have been. If it was, leave it. All right, so next up. And by the way, now that it's gone, no one cares. So if it was the little boy's shirt under the table, the little blue part, it's gone. No one cares. Anyway, and by the way, and that's an important point. We're seeing the before, so we know what was there, and we see the after, and maybe something got removed. Like I said, the strap on the mask got removed. Well, it was there. Yes, but is it important? Was that blue part under the table of his shirt important? No. So if it's not important, if it doesn't make the shot, if it doesn't help tell the story, and no one is going to miss it if it's gone, I give you permission to remove it. I give you the go-ahead to say, get rid of this stuff that no one cares about, that's not important, that doesn't tell the story, it doesn't need to be factually correct that there's a little sliver of his shirt is showing under the table. If it's important, leave it. If it's important, keep it. If it's not important and doesn't make a difference, feel free to get rid of it. If you say, no, it should be there, then keep it. All right, but that little part under the shirt, that little string on the mask, not important to me, so they're gone. Now, next up, so brought the exposure back down a little bit on this, and yep, OCD. And I have it too on other things. Let's go in, and I can see that by adjusting the exposure, that showed me a couple little strands of hair. I'm going to show you a couple techniques to get rid of that. But those are going to have to be in Photoshop. So before we go to Photoshop, let's go ahead and take care of another couple things. Now, I said the white balance looked good, and it does. But down here in the lower left-hand corner, I can see, I don't know, it's a shadow, but I can't tell the color of it. So a lot of times what I will do is I will take the white balance eyedropper, and I will click right in that shadow area, and that will reset the white balance for me based on that area. So whatever little amount of beige, whatever little amount of warm temperature that was in that area, that was throwing off the white balance ever so slightly, so I just removed it. All right. The only other thing I would do before I head to Photoshop to do the last few things I want to do to this is I noticed a couple things. Let's take care of sharpening first. Okay, so because this is a raw file, it automatically got sharpened the minute it came into Lightroom. So I didn't put this number on 40. She didn't put this number on 40. 40 is what we get by default on a raw file coming into Lightroom. So that sharpened the overall photo to 40. But I like to, whether I use 40, 25, 35, whatever number I use, If it's a person, especially a person that I like to refer to as should have soft skin, female subjects, babies, kids, whatever, should have soft skin, then I don't want the skin sharpened. So that's what this masking feature is for. And I showed you in the preset masterclass how to create a preset for sharpening faces. So let me go to my Sharpen Faces preset. So when I click it, it dropped my number down to 35, which I don't care about. I'll go ahead and put it back up to 40 for those that do care. But what it definitely did was increase the masking number. And you might say, well, is 60 enough? Is 60 too much? What's 60? What's masking? What's this do? Here's what we want in a nutshell, and this is the beauty of doing the sharpening here. I want her hair sharpened. I want her jewelry sharpened. I want her eyes sharpened. I want everything that should be sharpened, sharpened. I don't want her skin to be sharpened. So what masking allows Photoshop to do is Photoshop knows that's a face. It figures out what the face is, and therefore it knows I see two eyes, so everything around the eyes must be skin. I see hair, I know that's hair. It knows what things are. So if I hold down my Option or Alt key on that masking knob and click, you'll see this. You'll see a black and white image. And basically what's happening right now is everything that's white is being sharpened. Everything that's black is not being sharpened. So what I would want to do is I would want to increase my mask to where the skin is black. In other words, not being sharpened. If we go back to 0, where it starts, everything's getting sharpened. Face, skin, everything. But this allows me to choose how much sharpening I want and where. So I want it, and it does a beautiful job of figuring out every little detail, but it knows what skin is, and I can just bring this down and say only sharpen those areas of the photo. All right, so now the only other thing, I might do this in Photoshop, I might do it here. I noticed that, again, we got great lighting up here, but there's also, like, I don't know, maybe a rim light or a side light down here. There's a lot of light down here. And so there's just more light down here than we need. And I'm just thinking it's probably easier for me to adjust for that in Photoshop. But I could use an adjustment brush on exposure. So let's try that, for example. If I wasn't going to go to Photoshop, then I would want to do it here in Lightroom. I'd bring the exposure down, and I would just start brushing this area. Now that's too much. That brought it down too much, so I would just bring it back up some. So in other words, just trying to tone that lighting down. This is where we were at 0. And we're just going to bring it down just a little bit. Yeah, about like that. Just even that light out down below. We want her nicely lit, but we don't want so much light down there that we're like, what's going on down there? Because again, your eye is naturally drawn to the lightest parts of the photo. Okay, so now that we did that with the adjustment brush, I don't have to worry about doing it in Photoshop. So let's head over to Photoshop with the rest. So I hit Command E on Mac, PC, Control E. And it takes it over. It doesn't ask me a question because it automatically makes a copy. All right, so that's why I'm not going to make a copy, and that's why I normally don't make a copy here in Photoshop. But I'm going to make a copy in Photoshop just for a before and after standpoint. All right, so now that we got this over here with all the Lightroom adjustments, now we're going to go in and do the Photoshop type things. And the thing that's driving me the craziest right now is the few flyaway hairs. All right, so the flyaway hair technique, you can do this multiple ways. You could do a clone stamp, you could do a patch, you could do a healing brush, you could do a brush. You could do lots of ways to get rid of these flyaway hairs. There's even contrast adjustments that people do. There's all kinds of ways that people do flyaway hair. One of my favorite ways, especially to get rid of the most egregious ones, the ones that are sticking out way out further, is just go ahead and patch them out, and then I'll deal with the leftover that's near the head. So let's go ahead and grab our patch tool. Let's set the patch tool to content aware so we get nice sharp edges. And let's just go ahead and just patch these flyaway hairs out. All right, so see, that does a nice job of just chopping off the hair right there. Great. Now, again, like I said, I'll worry about the hair that's closer once I get rid of the biggest parts of it right here. All right, let's get rid of this. All right, so now we still have some flyaway hairs, there's just less of them and they're closer. So what I would now do is I would go into my clone stamp tool, but I'm going to set my clone stamp tool to a particular mode. That way I'm not, let me explain why. The background looks like it's white, solid color, but really, depending on the amount of light, it could be really light in the middle and not as light as it goes out to the edge. So when you do a lot of cloning from the edge in, you'll start to see the differences in background because of that. And so what I want to do is I only want to affect the pixels that are darker than the background, which is the hair. So if I go in and I set my brush, let's get our brush back down to hard, or get our brush back up to hard. And let's set the blending mode to lighten. What that tells it, I'm sorry, darken. No, lighten. I get them confused sometimes. What that tells it to do is anything that's darker than the color I'm going to sample, make it that color. So if I hold down my Option or Alt key to sample, which is right next to the hair, or anywhere near the hair, and then I brush, it will automatically paint out the hair, but not make the background any lighter than it is. Oh, hang on, sorry. Got to watch where I'm cloning from. There we go. And I would zoom in and I would take my time and really get in close, but for the sake of example, I'm just going to do it quick. All right. And if we have some on one side, most likely going to have some on the other side. And you got to be careful too. If you go too close, you might actually chop some hair off that should be there, and it will be noticeable. So we don't want that. So just be careful. And I'm not being careful, but just be careful. This is also how you'll know if your monitor is dirty, because you'll be trying to clone stuff out that's really on your monitor, not on the subject. I'm seeing some of that now. All right. Now, she's got some flyaway hairs on her. So in that case, I'm just going to go ahead and switch over to the spot healing brush. And I'm just going to brush those out. Okay. Got a lot of flyaway hairs on her neck. You could use the same technique on the background or the neck if you're using the clone stamp tool to lighten. But because the skin is so many different colors, so many different shades, I should say, it might require a lot more sampling. So the healing brush, although it's a lot to brush, will usually be more effective or faster. Okay. All right, and then we have this, whatever this crease is. Take care of that while we're here. All right, flyaway hairs I can spend all day on, but let's move on. You get the idea. I just showed you the technique. You would spend more time getting rid of all of them, but let's go ahead and get into some of this other stuff. So another thing I'm kind of noticing on her face is the shininess of the lighting itself. And so you could use a similar technique to darken that shininess to, like, for example, on this side, skin's not shiny. Right here, the skin's shiny from the reflection in the light. So what I would want is I would want the skin where it's shiny right here to look like this. So what I could do, I can go to my clone stamp. I could set the blend mode to darken instead of lighten. And I would also bring the opacity down because you want it to not be so hard or so obvious right off the bat. So here, let's go ahead and let's also soften up our brush. And I usually make a tool preset for that kind of stuff. So I'm not having to always choose those options over and over again. All right, so let's go ahead and select the part of the skin that looks good. And then we're just going to come over here and make our brush maybe a little bit bigger. And we're just going to go ahead and just see how it removes that shininess. Now it's only doing 40%, so you might have to do it in 2 passes. But what 40% stops you from doing is overdoing it. Because you want it to be lit, you just don't want it to be shiny. So that's why I set it to 40%. So it's not taking it away completely, it's just reducing it. And see, that 3rd pass was too much. All right, so same thing up here on the forehead. Yep, not noticeable, but it still looks natural, Kirsty says on the Facebook feed. Same thing. So that's the 40% is where it takes some of it down, but doesn't take it away completely. So same thing over here. See, I went crazy and got some of her hair. So I'm rushing, but you would take your time and do it right. So same thing on the nose, then you'd have to make your brush smaller because you're going to have to do more work. But you just take your time and go in and reduce that shininess in your subject. Now, you take your time and go over all of it, but that was the technique basically. Now, the next thing I love to do while I'm here with the eyes is go ahead and sharpen them using the sharpen tool. Now, we already applied sharpening overall to just those areas, but the other thing you want to do is just grab your sharpen tool and just a couple passes on the eyes themselves. That will just sharpen up just the eyes. That's all I want. And if she's like wearing jewelry that's, you know, standing out, I'd sharpen that jewelry while I'm on the sharpen tool as well. And again, you think it doesn't make a big difference, but wait till we see our before and after. All right, next up. Now there's some crease. She's wearing a t-shirt, so we expect wrinkles in a t-shirt, but there are a few extra creases that I might want to address, like down here. So I just go ahead and patch those out. And just use our patch tool. Oh, wait, hang on, undo. Set it back to normal. Normal blends in more. Content aware tries to make it more exact. There we go. So I just would blend in some of these extra wrinkles. And if there's a pattern, it's going to be harder. So you just want to make sure that the pattern continues over. Maybe you need to go up instead of across. Patterns are difficult. But yeah, just blend those wrinkles in. All right. You might want to address this one or not. I'll see what it does. Not bad. Okay. Cool. All right. Now let's talk about the under eye. The under eye is one of those areas where you can't remove this. If you remove this, number one, you need to make sure the image still stays age appropriate. The only human being that has nothing under their eyes is maybe a newborn. So we all have something under our eyes, but the unfairness is that when you are taking a portrait with studio lighting, is that extra darkness is being created by the shadow of the eye itself from the light pointing down. So in other words, you got a light above, pointing down is going to create shadows under here that she doesn't really have. So I like to reduce them, not take them completely away, but I am going to take it completely away temporarily. So let me take it completely away just for a second, and then I'll show you how I'll bring back as much of it as I want. So I'm going to select all of this with the patch tool, and just take it all away. Okay, unnatural, not good, not great, but don't deselect. So patch and then leave it. Then if you go under edit menu without doing anything else, you'll notice that you have fade patch selection. The minute you deselect, it goes away. The minute you go do something else, it goes away. You only have it immediately after you do the patch. Now you get undo on a slider. So I can bring it down and bring it back and say, bring it back to 65%. So I've gotten rid of, or 35, or it's really, I've gotten rid of 65% of it versus I got rid of none of it. So you can control how much of it you want to keep. So maybe 50% is appropriate, where you got rid of half of it to make it look more natural. But whatever number you want, 100 is probably not realistic. So take the number down in the 50s or 60s, and that way you've reduced that darkness by half. Same thing on this side. Oh, hang on, that was my fault. Make a selection here, get rid of all of it, and then Command-Shift-F, Control-Shift-F on Windows. We'll bring it back, and then we can say bring back some of it, not all of it, but bring back enough of it where it looks natural, but not where it was too much. So anything that you're trying to remove, but you don't want to completely remove, that's a technique to do it. In other words, you're not removing it, you're de-emphasizing it. You're just saying bring it down. All right, I can't believe this. I'm completely out of time. So we will have to come back and do more of this. So let's quickly get out. Show our before and after. That's our before, that's our after. Just a few tweaks, save, and I'm done. Bye, everybody. Have a great day. Sorry, I didn't know we were running out of time that quickly. Bye.